Hey, my name is Korat. Today I'm going to talk about subbases. A few people asked me about it, and I want to go through the process that I do to create them and some of the concepts and fundamentals behind them. Here is 4 quick examples before we get started. So, if you're looking at subbase, I'm going to assume that you have a subwoofer and you get the basic concepts of a synthesizer. I want to use Serum for the main video, but I want to use a few others later on just to show you that it is possible to use these concepts for anything. The first thing we have to talk about with a subbase is what exactly is a subbase. Subbase is a piece of audio that resides in between 60 Hz to 20 Hz, and usually we measure music from 20 to 20,000. That's typically the range that human ears can detect. Some people can detect down to 15 Hz, but anything below 20 is called inference sound, so it's not technically a subbase, and anything above 60 is going into the bass region, mid bass, and everything else. If you want to know more about it, just look up like a spectrum, like a frequency chart or something. There's one that I'll link in the description. So we see at the bottom of this analyzer we have the frequencies 20 to 20,000, and subbase is 60, which should be a B, and below. So we know what subbase is. So there's 2 things that's really important when creating a subbase, and that is the pitch. It's probably the most important, because if it's too high, it's not really a subbase. So here is a sound wave. I'm going to drop it down an octave, and the reason I use sound wave is because it's one harmonic, and when I get to the mixing part in the later section of the videos, I'll explain why you want to use just a plain harmonic versus different ones. But this is the purest tone that we can get with a sound base or a sound wave. So I'm playing a B, and that is almost exactly at 60. So that's the first one, is pitch. A few ways we can control it. We can just play the notes like I was doing earlier. Or we can set up like a modulation. So I have a mod wheel on my keyboard, and we can set up a pitch. And control it that way. So if I hold down a note, then just play with the mod wheel. Or we can have a envelope control it if we want to do like a 808 kind of style of kick drum. Actually, let me reset that, because I forgot that envelope 1 is actually automatically mapped to the amplitude. So let me reset this real quick. So with the envelope 2, we can also control the pitch, and follow that, the decay and everything else. Or we can use a LFO. So we can play the notes by hand. We can use a modulation output or input, I guess, source for like a model wheel, envelope, or a LFO. The next important thing is volume, and these are like used to create motion. So pitch and volume is what you use to create movement. So with volume, we can do the same thing as we did with the pitch. We can change the source from like envelope to LFO or model wheel. So with these two parameters, pitch and amp, you kind of have everything you need to make a sub bass. At least to make one that has like pretty interesting movements. So right now you got everything you need. You can go ahead and start making sub basses using these amp and volume if you want to. The third thing that I use quite a bit is what I'm going to call the tone, and that's creating harmonics. So let me reset this. When creating harmonics, I think a lot of people get confused because some people think that you can hear a sub bass and you can't really hear it. It's something you feel more than you hear. But with harmonics, you can kind of trick the ears to thinking that the sub bass is thicker or heavier than what it actually is. And so let me go through a quick example of no harmonics and a harmonic sub bass. So the first amp I'm going to play is going to have no harmonics. It's going to be a clean sound wave, and then I'm going to add harmonics and play that. So that's our clean sound wave. So I added a little bit of harmonics, and it gives it a tone that you can actually translate to different speakers, and it'll help come through on some phones, depending on the phone and headset, and like crappy audio speakers at the office or something. This is a good way for me to test the audio on if it's going to be the sub bass is going to translate. I can play it in the office and see how the sub bass is going to come through. So one way to add tone is to create these extra harmonics or overtones, and knowing if you know music theory, we can use that to help create that. So most of the time I work with minor scales, and the first chord is 1 3 5. If you hear a cat in the background, that's my cat. I'm sorry about that. But minor chord 1 through 5. So on these harmonics, I have the first, third, and fifth harmonic. So that creates kind of a nice combination of harmonics that sound well together. Compared to, say, the second, if I drop this down. So it still has the same weight, but it sounds thinner because the harmonics are phasing a little bit. So with Serum, you can actually add, using this pencil tool, you can add harmonics yourself, drawing out these different shapes. But you can't do that with everything. So the easiest way to add harmonics is to switch to a waveform that actually has harmonics already. So a square bass or a square wave will have odd harmonics, which is that 1 3 5 I was talking about earlier. So that's the sound wave of a square bass or square wave, and then just add a filter on top. And usually I do use key tracking if I'm doing a filter bass like this. There's two more options for adding harmonics. The first one is to draw it in. The second is to add a square bass or a waveform that has harmonics. The third option is to add distortion. My favorite type of distortion is a tube, because it's kind of gentle, but you can also get really crazy with it. The main thing about sub-bass distortion is, and processing for me, is this is usually the only processing I do. I don't add in chorus or phaser or flanger or like 13 different distortions. Usually just one. So let's try tweaking the tube and see how that sounds. So, don't do too much with the distortion, just keep it simple. And same thing with everything else with a sub bass. I don't have like 3 oscillators going on. I don't have a crazy cone filter sweeping back and forth. I don't have a lot of automation. The only automation that the most automation you probably need is just 2, and that's for the volume and the pitch. If you have more than 2 modulation sources going on at once, you're probably overdoing it. So I think that's it for creating a sub bass. There is one more. So there's one more way that you can do modulation with sub bass inside Serum, and I don't know if you can do it with anything else. And I love Serum for this because it's pretty unique. So let's go back and make our sub bass that we had before, and I'm going to change a few things, and I'll explain these in a little bit. So we have the sub bass now. Oh, hang on. So with Serum, you can frequency modulate to a noise, which, frequency modulation is not something new, but you can import samples and modulate the samples. So if you take a sample of like some vinyl crackle or something with like a lot of noise in the bottom end, you can use that to modulate the frequency, which is pretty neat. So it's a little bit unstable and unpredictable, but it's pretty cool. and because each sound is different, it's going to have a different pattern each time you do it. So right now you should have everything you need to create a pretty decent sub bass. Just to give a quick recap, sub bass usually falls between 60 Hz to 20 Hz. The main properties of the sub bass that controls the movement or defines the sub bass actually is the pitch and the volume. You can use those two parameters to control and give motion to the sub bass. The third option or minor characteristic is the tone, and that's creating harmonics to help translate the sound onto like cell phones and other speakers. To create harmonics, you can add distortion. You can add in harmonics with Serum by adding in the pencil key, or you can frequency modulate with noise or distortion. I think I said distortion. Or you can use a triangle, square wave, or a saw wave and filter it. There is one more thing that may give like some kind of movement, but I'll talk about that later. So right now I want to show some examples. So here is the first example. Oh, hang on a second. I gotta figure out why it's not playing. Okay, so the first example is just playing the notes going up scale, and then I have a mod wheel controlling the amplitude of oscillator 1. So when it goes up in pitch, it goes down in volume. So this patch is pretty important because it's very basic, but it teaches you how to mix sub bass, which I haven't talked about yet. With this patch, it's a very simple sound wave. It goes down a decay of 1/4, which I'll explain how to do that later. And with this mod wheel, it's decreasing the amplitude based on the frequency, and that has something to do with the flexure Munson curve. And basically what it says is the higher the frequency, the more sensitive our ears are. And there's a very deep and detailed reason why for that, and it's something to do with frequencies, and frequency is the repetition of cycles. So 60 Hz, which is a sub bass, is doing 60 cycles per say second or something, whereas a hi-hat is like 10,000, so it's doing 10,000 cycles. Well, if I take a baseball and throw it and toss a baseball at you 10 times compared to 10,000, you're not going to be as tired compared to 10 times compared to 10,000. So hi-hats take more frequencies and they produce more energy. So if we listen to the sub bass over and over again, it's not going to affect our ears because we're not as sensitive to those frequencies. So because of that, we don't hear them, so we need to keep them louder. So if you watch this curve, the sub bass doesn't go above negative 20 decibels. And that looks even, but I'm working on a 4.5 decibel slope. So if I turn this off, we can actually see how we actually hear the sounds to perceive it. So I'm dropping the sound by like 5 decibels to compensate the curve. And there's actually a really good website for it. So here we have the bottom line is how we are sensitive to different harmonics, and down here we have the sub bass 60 hertz to 20 hertz. So the top of the line sub bass is going to be usually the loudest compared to a hi-hat. It may be the lowest. Actually 2000 to 6000, which is where most human speak or vocals sit at. This is actually the most sensitive area, but you can see the sub bass is a whole lot louder compared to everything else. So one more recap. We got sub bass being played on different notes, just going up the scale, and then you have a volume modulation. So we have a pitch being played by the MIDI notes and volume being controlled by a modulation. And we can see it going down. Let me reset this back to 4.5 so we can just get back where it was. Here's the second sub bass example. It's probably muted. Okay, so this one's pretty cool, and what it's doing is on this first half, this sub bass oscillator A is static, so it's not moving. I mean, it's going up the notes when I'm playing the notes, but that's it. I have this note modulator, which is doing the volume shaping depending on the note, and I have a modulation wheel. This modulation wheel is for the second, or for the harmonics. So usually I use A for everything, but I split up the harmonics into B side, and the way I do that is by just drawing the little bars and leaving the sub bass harmonic out. And once the modulation wheel turns active into the second half on the 21st, it turns on the aux source of LFO1 to 1/8 triplets. So once it gets to the 21st, then the harmonics starts vibrating. So you can tell, like, the first one is, it has a little bit of movement, and then on the second half or the next 8 it'll start vibrating a little bit more. So let's play it one more time. So real simple, no distortion, don't have any kind of effects. The only kind of process I do on these really is compression, or using a compressor. And the first compressor is usually to tie them together. When you're changing pitch, especially on a sub bass, you're going to lose a lot of volume dynamic wise. So you want to add a compressor, not too heavy. Right here I have like a 0.8 decibel compression. This one I have 1.2. This one I have 3.6. The first one is to like keep it tidy, and the second one is to like beef it up. So I may use 2 compressors, I may use 1 depending on the sub bass. But if I do, it's really light, and it depends on how I'm seeing the or how the waveform is reacting. This third example is using a different synthesizers using polysynth. So let's play this one and see what this sounds like. So that's using the same method as we had before with the filter square wave. Doing the same with the poly. Have a square wave here, only oscillator 1 is being turned on, and then I have an LFO controlling this filter. So at the end of these like 4 bars, it slowly opens up the filter to add in new harmonics. So what this I did, this is pretty standard sub bass. We have EQ to cut off the bottom and a harmonic, ladder filter to cut off the top, and compressor to bring it all together. So I went ahead and added a few more processing. I added a chorus, reverb, mid-side split, a little bit of distortion, and just to show you that starting off with a sub bass, you can slowly process it into a mid bass. And then if we add that with a drum loop, alright, so with this sound, it sounds very wet. It's very in the side bands, and with sub bass, you want to keep it mono. You want to keep it in the middle. So with this chorus, you can see I'm cutting off the bottom. Same thing here. This is just a distortion unit. With the reverb, I got cut off at the bottom also. Mid sideband, cut off on the bottom. Multiband, pretty sure it's cut off on the bottom. Yeah. So if we play this in mono, everything should still be there. And if we play it inside, the sub bass should disappear. So keep your sub bass in mono, because when you have it on big speakers, they're going to phase out and then you're just going to have no bass at all. One last time, filter square wave with some chorus and reverb. Let's see, I don't... Okay, there's one more example I want to talk about, because it's kind of by itself and it's not typically used, but sometimes people do it. There is a thing called a phasing sub bass, and it's when you take 2 sine waves and play them right beside each other, and they create movement when you do that. So let me do that real quick. So here we have a single sine bass, and I'm going to play an F and an F sharp. So we can see we kind of get the same effect as like an amplitude modulation. And if I change it to like a different pitch, it'll go a little bit faster. Pretty neat. I think that's everything that I could think of. So one last recap, and then I'll go into the mixing. And the mix session, there's also going to be a few miscellaneous advice that's pretty important that doesn't really fit the other places. So sub bass 60 hertz to 20 hertz, you can control it with pitch and volume automation, and you can add harmonics with distortion or filtering a waveform that has a lot of harmonics. So we got those done. Well, I want to listen to some mixing examples so I can like analyze these tracks and give some like feedback on them, why they're doing what they're doing, what may need to be changed, what I would change personally, and some other things about that. We have 4 tracks. We have one from Rez that came out on Signal EP. I think it's a free EP, so if you like this track, you can find it on Bandcamp and pick it up. Got another one from Rumble Illusion. Got one that's Sylvian Sound Double Dutch. Came out on Version Collective, one of their compilation tracks came out last year, I think. And we got one from Willer, the Still Dream track, which is also a free download if you go to SoundCloud. So the first one is Rez. Let's just take a listen, and then I'll highlight the areas of interest. And remember, we're only talking about sub bass, so everything else I'm not really paying attention to.
Frickin' laser beam.
So, a few things. Pretty sick track. But the first thing I noticed is the kick drum is louder sub bass content wise compared to the main one. So you can see the sub bass kicks above this line. I chopped these these clips up so I can get to the interesting parts. And he uses about 2 or 3 different basses, and the sub bass level is not consistent. So in the first part you see the sub bass is down here, and then once it gets to the second part it jumps up around this area. So right there on that reese bass, there's one reese bass that jumps really high up here. So it sounds like this first one is one bass, this one's the second bass, and this reese bass is the third one. I know Rez has improved quite a bit since this came out, so I'm sure he knows this already, but for this type of example I would use 3 different sub patches maybe, or maybe 1. And then just cut off the sub bass from each of the reese basses. And this C is actually probably the loudest note, and it's the highest pitch, which is definitely a no-go in my book. But those are the only 3 that I seen pick it out on those. The next track is Rumble Illusion. So pretty heavy track. So the reason I picked this one is 2 reasons. This part right here, he has a very, very energetic sub bass. It goes back and forth. There's a lot of pitching, but the volume's good. And to create a motion, he slowly fades out the volume. Very good use of motion there. And then on the second drop, it changes to like a C note, and he has a little bit more control over volume compared to Rez, but it's still a little bit too loud. And I know Rumble has also improved his production a whole lot since this track came out, but the tightness of the volume control, but when he changes the pitch to the higher octave or the higher note, is pretty well done. It goes up about maybe 2-3 decibels. His sub bass is a little bit louder than what I would do personally, but it's just a preference. So it might be hitting -10. That's fine. Really good use of the amp modulation there. This one, double Dutch, it's pretty interesting. So take a look at this one.
Let it roll.
Alright, so it seems like he's using an LFO to play. He's playing the notes for sure. It's going like a low pitch and then like a higher pitch. And it's using an LFO to re-trigger, to kind of create like a pitch shifting. So I created something similar, but not exactly, to show you how to find a sub bass you like and recreate it. So let's listen to this one more time. So I can see he has 1, 3, and 5 harmonics, so that tells me it's going to be a square wave. Probably filter a little bit more than that, to be honest. And it kind of swoops up a little bit before it starts getting to the LFO. Probably not as intense or not as slow, but still is a swoop. It's at the very beginning though.
Let it roll.
Actually, it's not a swoop. It'd be fine though, but it's very similar. So here we have LFO going up, and I have this mod wheel controlling the speed because it changes from like 1/4 to like a slower rate. So again, LFO speed is controlled by the modulation. And then we have the LFO control the filter. So if we play these two together, we'll have the bass. You know, it's not exact, but the concept is there. It's using the LFO to move, and it's using a square wave that's pretty filter to create the harmonics. This last one is Willer Still Dream.
Still Dream.
So really good solid mix down, except for one of the brass notes. But sub bass wise, the sub bass is probably like a 10-10. It's really consistent and it changes the rhythm, and it's still really good mix. This first part is going a whole lot more energetic, and then the second part, it slows down a little bit. see, the sub bass is still the same level even when it changes the rhythm. If I had to guess, it could either be a controlled pitch with a LFO and he's controlling the rate, or depending on how you program it, it could be a envelope controlling the pitch and just playing the notes really quick. So if he changes from like 1/8 notes to 1/4 on the second half, you could also do that. There is one comment about this track though. One of the bass notes goes down in pitch around a C note, and he loses a little bit of volume. So right there, it drops to like a C note, and it's not bad. It's just something I want to point out so people can see it. It's honestly not that big of a deal, but I just want to bring that up. So that's it for the mixing examples. So with mixing, you want to, usually your sub bass is going to be the highest or the loudest frequency because we can't hear it and it's going to take up the most headroom. So with that, knowing that it's going to be the loudest, depending on how many harmonics can dictate how loud your sub bass is going to be. If you have a lot of harmonics, you can't put all the volume into your lower harmonic, which is where all the weight comes from. But if you use like a solid single clean sound wave, that's where you get most of your sub bass at. So that's why a lot of people like this clean sound waves, because you can get the most volume, the most power and weight out of that, compared to like say trap sub basses. They have like a lot of booming and a lot of tones, but it's a lot of rumble. It doesn't have that weight to it. So I want to open a patch that I created, and I'm going to share this with everybody. It's a master pitch patch that I created with Serum, just to show you the ideas of all the concepts and how you can put it together. So we have a clean sound wave, but not really that clean. Okay, we got a clean sound wave. And we see the volume's not changing, or it is changing to be even. And the way I did that is with a note modulator. Map the note modulator to the levels to bring it down the higher you go. So one thing about sub bass, unless you're doing like a phasing sub bass, you want to play only one note at a time, so I got mono turn on. So if I play a bunch of notes, it's only going to play that one note. I pushed the wrong button, sorry about that. The next part I have set up is this this pitch modulator, which does the same thing as the note modulator. It changes the volume, but also changes the pitch. And we've seen this in action before already. And I also get amp going to the same thing. This is actually the master amp. And I got a tone selector which will cycle through these different waveforms. So that's the basic of this patch. One thing you can do with Serum is, as we did before, is create an aux source so that we can have the LFO controlling the pitch and the volume. pretty neat stuff. There is one more thing. Oh yes. So if you're playing notes, okay, before I go any further, there is one issue with sub bass that other sounds may not have. A lot of people have issues with clicks in their sub bass, and there is a reason why. So you can hear it clicking back and forth. And the reason the way you can fix that is with the attack. So if we increase the attack, it's fading in, but you still hear the click. So if we increase the release, we don't hear that. So the attack and release is what causes the sound to click into each other. And the way we can fix that is, of course, increase it. But if you use 50 milliseconds is the fastest rate that we can use that the human ear can't typically change or detect changes. So technically we can hear the click is gone, but 50 milliseconds is the fastest you can use without changing the tone of the sound, I guess. So there's no clicks now. So with the envelope, there's a few more things that I want to show off. There's one thing I want to show off, and then we should be good with the sub bass tutorial. And I know there's a lot of things I probably didn't go in depth with, but I'm trying to keep it as short as possible because I know I have a tendency to over explain things if I get lost into the video. So with this sub bass master patch that I have, I only did this in Serum, or not Serum, Bitwig, because I don't know how to do it with other programs, or it's the only thing I know how to use. So with Bitwig, I set a release timer to change the release automatically. So if I have it at 100%, it's going to change to 213 milliseconds, which is 1/8 in 140 BPM. If I change it to 200%, it's going to be 1/4, which is 428 milliseconds BPM. If I change it to 300, it should be 1/2. And then I can change the curve also. And I also have a plug button to like change the sustain. So how am I getting this release number? There's a site called Music Calculator, and musiccalculator.com. Go to the delay timing, change the BPM and delayed division, and you have your milliseconds. So you can create delays that actually, or not delays, decays that decay before the next note comes. So if I want to do like 1/8 notes, I can set it to 100, and then I can play. I can put some notes down. And I'll know that the first note will end before the next one comes in. So that's one other advanced way of controlling rhythm and decays and all that and other fun stuff. I believe that's all that I have. So hopefully that's everything. So just to recap, a sub bass is audio that's below 60 to 20 hertz, and the two main ways to control a sub bass is with pitch and volume modulation. You can create harmonics or tone by mainly adding harmonics in Serum, creating distortion, or using a oscillator that already has harmonics, like a square wave or a triangle, or like a saw wave. Let's see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, if you want to prevent clicks into your sub bass, use a 50 millisecond attack and release. Keep it in mono. You can control modulations with envelopes, LFOs, or modulation wheel. If you're going up in pitch, make sure you control your volume depending on the Fletcher curve, because of how our ears react to the sound. So if you're going lower in pitch, you probably have to increase the volume. And processing, the only thing I do for processing is very, very, very gentle compression. I don't use crazy amount of distortion. I don't use flasers or anything like that. And if I do, it's probably a mid bass. So with sub bass, keep it simple, stick to pitch and volume modulation, and that should be it. You should be good to go for everything else. If you have any questions or comments, because I know there's something I may have missed or may not have explained well enough, just let me know. Social contacts on screen. You can contact me through one of those ways. Hope everybody has a good day. Thanks for stopping by.